Yo, the topic, oh shit man, the topic of this video is going to be about enlightenment. Look at this area that I'm in, guys. Ooh, the church is there. Then you got this type of bushland area anyway. The topic of this video is going to be about enlightenment. I actually want to get onto this very badly now. I really want to make a video about enlightenment. What does that actually mean? What does that word actually mean, enlightenment? Is it the buzzword or something like that? What does enlightenment actually mean? What does that word actually mean? Is it just all a bunch of hogwash? What is this whole concept of enlightenment about? I really wanted to get onto this, guys, to make a video about this. Like, what is enlightenment all about? Hopefully the audio is going to be very crisp and perfect and stuff like that. You're going to be able to hear me and all that type of stuff. Hopefully you can still at least attempt to hear me and stuff. The audio is not going to get too muffled by the roadway in the back. Look at the double-decker bus, guys. The topic of this video, guys, is going to be about enlightenment. I really wanted to get into the whole thing about now enlightenment, talk about it. Let's just start off with what does the word enlightenment actually mean? What's that word mean, enlightenment? What's that word all about? The word enlightenment, basically, it means, maybe I should like face, I think this way would be a lot better. Would that be more interesting? Perhaps, I don't know. Enlightenment, maybe I might turn it around. In a nutshell, to put it into a nutshell, the word enlightenment, basically, it translates to the fact that we experience some type of great knowing of something. Like your knowledge increases with enlightenment to some extent. It's almost like a level of like self-awareness. You become more self-aware, basically, of like the truth and who you are as a person. You become more in touch with the truth of our reality and stuff. You become more aware, basically. That's what enlightenment's all about. I always was like very curious about this when I was little. Enlightenment, what's that all about? There's always all these like it's always like when you go on YouTube, there's always like these types of like pseudo spiritual videos and these guru-esque videos, and they all relate to the whole concept of like what is like about enlightenment and becoming enlightened and etc. and stuff like that. That is such a big fat mystery to me, guys. What's enlightenment actually all about? I actually want to like get onto it in this video now, right now, especially on the internet, enlightenment and all that type of stuff. What's that all about, man? It's such a big fat mystery to me, man. Enlightenment and all that. What's it all about? What's the whole concept? What's the whole thing about enlightenment? I was always very interested when I was like a lot younger and smaller, man. By enlightenment, it kind of, when I say enlightenment, what do you actually think about? Typically, a lot of you are going to be thinking about probably Buddhism and stuff like that, or Hinduism. Something similar to that, like these types of like spiritual religions and all that type of stuff. That's what you're probably most likely going to be thinking about. Fucking hell, hopefully a fox isn't going to run at me, man. So scared when I'm out here, so I feel like a fox might come at me, man. Enlightenment is such an important like video idea. It's so important to talk about enlightenment, guys. What does that word actually mean? What's it actually mean to become enlightened, to experience enlightenment? It's such an important concept and topic to talk about. Again, to put it into my own words, if we're going to discuss definitions, etymology and etc., enlightenment basically is when us human beings, we become more in line with the truth and reality. We align ourselves to the truth and reality. We get to actually see the world for what it actually is. I think that's how I would define enlightenment, coming to understand the ultimate reality behind everything. That is enlightenment, in my opinion, to understand what life is all about, actually, what life is really all about, not just all the bullshit that's in between it. What is like life actually all about? What is the truth behind existence and our reality and all that type of stuff? That's what enlightenment's all about, guys. That's what I do think that's what it kind of all relates to, guys. It relates to this whole like thing about like us becoming more aware of our world and stuff, and becoming more closer to the truth and etc. and stuff like that. It is a kind of a very tricky, wishy-washy concept, enlightenment. What's that actually what's that actually mean, enlightenment? It is kind of a little bit wishy-washy. To put it into my own words, I think it's basically I think enlightenment is all about just like becoming more aware of the truth, more aware of what life is actually about, but becoming closer to the truth, coming to know more about our world, and not just seeing the veils, all of the like there's always like a filter, a cover that's always over our eyes. That gets when you experience enlightenment, that becomes removed. We become just more aware of our world. We become more closer to the truth and reality and all that type of stuff. That's what enlightenment's really all about. Just becoming a little bit more aware of the world around us and becoming more closer to the truth. It's a very dubious, tricky concept though, isn't it? Enlightenment is such a tricky concept for me to talk about and make like this type of, like to put it into like this type of video. Enlightenment, guys, is super fucking important that you try to the best of your ability to become like a little bit more enlightened and all that type of stuff. To try and attempt to experience enlightenment. It's very, very important, man, that you try at least to come a little bit closer to it, man. A bit closer to enlightenment and all that type of stuff. To see it. To try and come more closer to the truth and whatever. It's very, very, very important. It's actually very, very, very important, man. That you try as hard as you can to come closer and closer to the truth with a capital T. It's very, very, very important, guys. You try as hard as you possibly can to come closer and closer to the truth with a capital T. That's how I would define the word enlightenment. I think it's basically all about just us. We try as hard as possible to come closer and closer to the truth. That's basically what enlightenment's about, guys, to put it into my own words. Yeah, it's basically about us. We try as hard as we possibly can to come closer and closer to the truth. I honestly do believe that, guys. I think that's what enlightenment's about. Just us trying to come closer and closer to the truth. It's such an important concept. It's got very quiet now, man. It's so quiet now. It's not that difficult to make this video now, is it? But I keep going in circles. Enlightenment is such an important concept and topic. But when I say enlightenment, what do you actually think about? I think a lot of you guys, you're probably going to be thinking about Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, specifically the Buddha. Because it does kind of go back to the Buddha to some extent. I do actually believe that it actually does go back to the Buddha. Its whole concept and thing about enlightenment, becoming enlightened, I think it all goes back to the Buddha. 100%, guys. I think so. Doesn't it go back to the Buddha a little bit? I 100% think so, man. I think it does go back to the Buddha to a massive extent, man. This whole thing about like enlightenment, I think it actually goes back to the Buddha to some extent, man. And he was like behind a lotus tree. Obviously, you know, like the story of the Buddha, he was like behind a lotus tree and stuff like that. And he was behind the lotus tree and he was like sitting down. He was like carefully thinking about everything so properly. He was like very deeply meditating, contemplating. And it struck him at some point when he was like in such a deep like state of like meditation and contemplation, he actually, of course, so to speak, became enlightened, and his eyes opened up, his third eye, so to speak, in the middle of his like brain opened up. If you, I'm obviously not in a literal way, but I'm talking about in a metaphorical way. Like his third eye opened up. The Buddha. If you think about the Buddha, he's actually the whole thing about enlightenment, becoming enlightened, more aware, and all that type of stuff. It does kind of link back and trace back to the Buddha. I do think so, guys. I 100% do think so. It does go back to the Buddha. 100%, I do actually think so. That actually, the whole thing about enlightenment, it goes back to the Buddha. I do think so, guys. I think all of the thing about enlightenment, becoming enlightened, more aware, all of that, it all goes back to the Buddha. I do think so, guys. Doesn't it go back to the Buddha? When I say enlightenment, what do you think about? You really do think about like Buddhism and Hinduism and stuff like that. Bits of like India and Indian culture. That's what you think about when I say enlightenment. I think a lot of you guys probably have that in mind. The Buddha, obviously, enlightenment, it does kind of go back to him a little bit. The whole thing about being enlightened. What's that actually all about? What is enlightenment actually all about? Enlightenment, it's when you open your eyes and see the world for how it actually is. That's how I would define the word enlightenment. It's like when you become more spiritually, not just spiritually, but more mentally and physically and stuff like that, aware of your surroundings and all that type of stuff. That's what I think enlightenment's about, guys. I think that's just when you become a little bit more cautious of the world. You see things for what they actually are. You don't just see behind. You don't just live in a fantasy world. You see, is when you start to open your eyes to the world around you. That's what enlightenment's about, man. I actually do think so. If you look at the Buddha, and stuff like that specifically. It's very interesting, man. If you think about the Buddha, basically, what happened to the Buddha? He actually, when he was like deeply meditating, contemplating, he started to open his eyes and he started to see the world around him for what it actually is, and stuff like that. He started to see the world around him for what it actually is. And basically, he came to the realization that suffering is like a is very real and all that. He came to the realization, man, that suffering is actually very much so real. It's in our world. Suffering is like a reality that we all have to come to terms with and face. That's one of the forms of like truths that Buddha came to know through his like enlightenment period, is that he came to understand and know about the fact that suffering is very much real, guys. It's actually an integral part of our world and our universe, is that we have to suffer and all that type of stuff. We go through a tremendous amount of suffering, guys. It's very much the case that suffering is like a reality. It's not just a fantasy. That a lot of our world relates to like suffering. A lot of our world's kind of linked to like, very intimately linked to like suffering and like issues like that and stuff. And the Buddha, he came to the realization that suffering pretty much it's just how it is. We're all going to suffer. It's just a part of life, basically. And you just have to try and become a little bit more detached. Basically, that's what the Buddha was on about. I'm not. That's not too literal. Don't take my words too literally. I'm not saying that's like quote. I'm not quoting the Buddha directly, but I'm just saying that a little bit about what the Buddha was about saying was that life is about like a lot of life is just all about suffering, and you have to just kind of deal with that and become a little bit more detached. Don't be too like materialistic. That's a little bit about what the Buddha was saying. Anyway, but I don't want to dwell on the Buddha too much. But obviously, when you talk about fucking enlightenment. When we're discussing fucking enlightenment, 100%, a lot of you guys are probably gonna be thinking about the Buddha, Buddhism, and Hinduism, and these religions and all that type of stuff is very important. It's actually very, very important. These like Buddhism, Hinduism. You should study these religions very, very carefully. Study the life of the Buddha very, very carefully. 100% encourage you guys to study those things very, very carefully, man. It is actually very, very important. You should 100% study the Buddha, Hinduism, Buddhism very, very carefully. These things are very, very important and all that type of stuff. It's very, very important, man, that you study these things like very, very carefully and all that. 100%, guys. I encourage you guys to study it. Yeah. Buddhism, Hinduism. Sikhism is also very important. Sikhism is actually very important as well. Study these religions as well carefully, but obviously enlightenment, it's not just about these it's not just about the Buddha or Hinduism or Sikhism or Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism. There's other things as well. It's not just about this, but typically, man, when you start to talk about like enlightenment, it does kind of go back to these types of things. It does go back to like the Buddha, Hinduism, Buddhism. When you talk about like enlightenment and all that, it just tend to go back to these types of things, man. And these sorts of things are very, very important, man. These sorts of things are very, very important. Enlightenment is so important, man. Enlightenment and all that. It's actually very, very important. Enlightenment, becoming a little bit more aware of the world and the reality that we all have to face and stuff like that. Enlightenment is so important. But how do you actually come to become enlightened? If we go back to the Buddha, perhaps maybe meditation, deep contemplation. I think that's like one of the sorts of like ways you can attempt to become a little bit more enlightened. Just like the Buddha. Look at the Buddha's life. What happened to him? How did he experience enlightenment? Basically, he retreated away. He kind of retreated away from his society. He found like a tree and he was like deeply meditating, contemplating, maybe through like deep forms of like meditation, contemplation. Maybe perhaps you might actually experience enlightenment just like the Buddha. There's other ways as well about this, man. It's not just about like isn't just about like meditating, contemplating deeply. Obviously there's a couple other things as well, I think. So enlightenment is such an important thing. It's such a uniquely human thing. So many like the whole thing about enlightenment, I don't think there's any other creature that cares about this at all. Only as human beings, we experience this like great feeling of like knowledge and a knowing and understanding the world for what it actually is. That's so insane. Enlightenment is such an important topic, guys. Becoming enlightened and seeing the world for what it actually is. You don't see through a veil of a lens, typically a lot of us, we always have like lenses on our eyes. We don't see things properly as they actually are and all that type of stuff, man. We have lenses on our eyes and stuff like that, and so we see things in a very tainted, interpreted, emotional way. We don't see things objectively, you know what I mean? I think that's what it means to be enlightened, to become more, to be more objective, see the world more objectively. That's why I think that's what the whole concept and thing about enlightenment is all about. I think that's why it relates to, like, seeing the world more objectively, not seeing things more in an emotional way, not seeing things through a lens, a filter, whatever you want to call it. Seeing things in a more fucking objective way. Objectivity, I think that's what really enlightenment's all about. It's all about becoming a little bit more objective, not seeing things through a lens, a filter. Typically that's almost always happens if you're like, especially when you're young, we always see things in such an emotional way. We always see things through a lens, the lens of your society. Like if you grew up in, let's just say you're from China, you're going to see things through Chinese culture. Basically, that's what I'm saying. The Chinese culture, that's going to taint your whole like thing about like how you see the world, how you view like morality and ethics and all that type of stuff. All of that's going to like be tainted by your culture. Like if you were like a person from China, the Chinese culture, that type of society, that's going to mold your whole brain and how you interpret the world. That's going to like mold your psychology and etc. And you're going to have like these very like kind of warped understandings about our world. You're not going to see things in a very clear way. Your society is going to like condition you to see things in a very tainted way. And typically, it's going to be like a lens over your eyes. Like if you're like from China, you're going to see things through Chinese culture. Basically, if you're from America, you're going to see things through American culture. Whatever part of the world you're from, you're going to see things through your culture and society. That's like a type of lens, a filter that we all have to like kind of try and like push away. It's very difficult to do that though. We always see things through like our society and our culture. You might not think so. You might think that you're an independent individual. Think about like things like zoophilia, pedophilia. Obviously, I don't want to get too much into like morality and like proving like right and wrong and all that type of stuff. Obviously, a little bit. It's all because if you think about why do we see like pedophilia, zoophilia? Not just that. Maybe that might be a little bit too controversial. Let's bring it back. Let's just talk about murder, homicide. That might be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. Why do we see murder, homicide as being kind of like not good, being like morally questionable? Even though if you look at our histories, all of our history is just about bloodshedding and killing each other. Basically, that's a lot of our history, man. But now in our modern day society, we think that murder and homicide and genocide, this is horribly wrong. But our ancestors didn't think like this. Our ancestors were all about like genocide, homicide, and killing each other and all that type of stuff, man. It's only now, right now, that we believe that like homicide, genocide, murder, killing each other is like wrong. Do you see? It's all because of the fact that our society has changed, and now we have like a different lens, a different filter over our eyes, and we see things in a different way in terms of like morality and ethics. There's always going to be a lens, a filter, and it's so hard to push it all out of the way. You're always going to be seeing things through a lens, a filter. It's so important that you come to realize this, guys, that you come to understand this, that you're always going to be seeing things through a lens, a filter, man. It's so like difficult to do away with this and all that. There's always going to be like a lens, a filter in front of your eyes. Pushing that lens and filter out of the way is almost nearly impossible, man. It's almost nearly impossible. There's always going to be like a lens, a filter in front of your eyes. And pushing that lens and filter out of the way is going to be nearly impossible, man. It's almost going to be literally like, it's very, very difficult to become like, to see things like in a very objective way, not to see things through a lens, a filter. Typically we do see things, even if you might not think so, that you might think that you're like very like critically, you're like a critical thinker, you're intellectual, you're like a free thinker, you're enlightened, you're not going to get like fucking, you think for yourself and all that. You might think like that, man. You might think that you're a critical thinker and you have like all these like, you think for yourself and you have like enlightenment and you're like, you have your own thoughts and ideas and beliefs and all that type of stuff. Actually, if you carefully think about it, it's very much the case that you're probably brainwashed and your psychology is probably molded by your culture that you were raised in and stuff, in your society that you were raised in. All of that, that's where you get your beliefs from, most likely. Anyway, but enlightenment, that's a big fact. I'm going on a side tangent. Let's get back to the topic of the video though. Enlightenment is so important, guys, that you come to like You come closer to the truth, basically. That's what enlightenment's about, that you attempt as hard as possible to come closer to the truth. That's what enlightenment's about, guys. You don't just stay shrouded in ignorance. A lot of us, we don't give a fuck about being ignorant. It's so dumb to me. We don't even care about coming closer to the truth, which is so important. Only if you don't care about the truth, you're not going to progress anywhere in your life. You're just going to stay ignorant and kind of retarded. Only by coming closer to the truth can you like actually meaningfully improve your life. A lot of us, we don't give a fuck. We just stay ignorant. We stay as ignorant retards. It's kind of like very sad, man. A lot of us, we don't give a fuck, man. We stay like very ignorant and stupid, man. We don't really care about becoming a little bit more like enlightened and all that type of stuff. We choose to stay ignorant and stuff. It's kind of very dumb. It's like souls. It's actually very sad that a lot of us, we don't give a fuck about becoming enlightened and all that. A lot of us, we just choose to stay ignorant. We don't care about coming closer to the truth with a capital T. The truth is so important, guys. The truth is actually very much important. The truth and all that type of stuff is very, very important, man. The truth and all that type of stuff. It's actually very, 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 very important, man. The truth and all that. Coming closer to the truth. Coming closer to the truth and all that. It's like such an important thing. Coming closer to the truth and becoming more objective and all that type of stuff is actually so important, guys. It's very much more important. It's so much more important than you would realize. A lot of us, we don't seem to value the truth a lot. We just stay ignorant and stupid, man. A lot of us, we choose to stay ignorant and stupid and stuff. It's kind of like very sad, man. We choose to stay ignorant and stupid. We don't even fucking value becoming enlightened and educated and all that. It's so sad, man. It's fucking enlightenment. Well, back to the topic of the video. I could keep going on fucking side tangents, man. Enlightenment, what does it mean to become enlightened? What's that all about? You're probably going to be thinking about the Buddha or Buddhism or Hinduism or Sikhism. That's what you're probably going to be thinking about. Obviously, it does kind of go back to that to some extent. I do think so. Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, I think it does kind of relate to that to a massive extent. What's enlightenment all about, guys? Basically, you see the world for what it actually is. That's what I'm getting at. That's what enlightenment is. Or that's what it should be. Obviously, there's different definitions for these types of words and terminologies. Maybe perhaps you might believe that enlightenment relates to something else. You might believe that enlightenment, it relates to something else or something like that. I don't know. It's like all like very tricky. It's so tricky to properly define words and whatever. It's so very tricky, man. It's like there's all these like there's like a multitude of ways to define these types of words, man. It's so very tricky. And I think that it's basically, it relates pretty much to like becoming more aware. That's what I would say. Obviously there's different definitions anyway, but back to the topic at hand. I don't want to keep getting into like delving into it and trying to explain to you like what specific words mean and all that. I hate doing that, man. I hate fucking trying to define these words for you guys. Obviously it's going to help you become help you with like becoming more aware of this, but anyway, enlightenment, guys, it's pretty much, it does just relate to like coming closer to the truth. That's what the Buddha, again, it goes back to the Buddha, Buddhism, Sikhism, all that type of stuff, man. If you look at the Buddha, if you look at the Buddha and all that type of stuff, the Buddha's life and all that, it kind of, basically, how did he go about becoming enlightened? He pretty much just retreated away and he was like behind a tree and he was like deeply meditating, contemplating. That's what he was doing for his enlightenment thing. Deeply meditating, contemplating. He was like very deeply like contemplating and meditating. That's how he began to experience enlightenment. Maybe perhaps that is one of the ways, that's like an avenue that you could take to become enlightened through meditation, contemplation. I would encourage you to do that, guys. Even though I think there's like a fuck ton of other ways to become more enlightened. Just meditating, contemplating, maybe perhaps that might help you achieve enlightenment in some ways. Definitely, I think meditation, I think we all should like meditate and contemplate. I think all of that's so important. Definitely meditation, I highly would recommend and encourage you guys to get into that. But still, enlightenment is such a wishy-washy concept. It's so difficult to put it into words, especially for a little video like this, a 40-minute long video like this, man. It's so hard to put it into words, to properly talk about it. Enlightenment. But isn't it like, it's something that you must value as a human being, as a person. Enlightenment is like so fucking important, guys, that you actually value enlightenment. You try and come closer and closer to the truth. You try and come closer and closer to discovering what the truth is all about. That's what enlightenment's about. It's about becoming more objective, seeing the world as it actually is. Just like the Buddha, he started to come to the realization that suffering is actually very real, and it's actually very intimately linked to our existence and our society and our culture, and not actually, maybe not society, culture, maybe perhaps it's just like, if you're born, if you're alive, you're going to suffer. That's just how it is. The Buddha came to know this and stuff, and basically he was trying to find solutions, but the Buddha, he pretty much came to the realization that suffering is pretty much unavoidable. You just have to kind of stay detached, don't become too materialistic, and you won't suffer as much. And that's like a type of enlightenment he discovered. And basically he came closer to the truth that basically, yeah, suffering is actually very fucking real, guys. It's linked to like being alive. If every single living organism undergoes some form of suffering, guys. So like if you're alive, you're probably going to experience some form of suffering in your, even perhaps maybe you're not right now, but you're going to experience, we all have to go through some type of pain inevitably. We're all going to fucking die as well. So you see, it's pretty much, yeah, it's pretty fucking, you can see it's fucking, the Buddha, he was a little bit, he kind of realized all this, and basically the Buddha, he came to the true realization, the truth that we all suffer and suffer. The only way to avoid suffering is to become more detached, not to become too materialistic, and you'll be alright to some extent. You still gotta suffer, well, but suffering, guys, is such a, obviously not suffering, enlightenment, it's so difficult to properly put it into words. It's such an important concept. I'm so fucking glad the word enlightenment is actually in the fucking English language. I actually do think so, guys. I'm so like glad that it's actually a part of the English language, the enlightenment and all that. Imagine if this whole concept, imagine if we didn't even have like a word for this type of concept of enlightenment. It's such an important concept. Coming closer and closer to the truth. Becoming more aware of the world around us. Enlightenment, guys, is so fucking important. Becoming more aware of the world around us. Enlightenment is such a fucking important thing, man. Becoming enlightened and all that type of stuff, man, it's so fucking important. So it sucks that so many of us, we stay fucking ignorant for our whole lives. We don't give a fuck about like coming closer to the truth. It's so important, guys, that you value like coming closer to the truth, and you value becoming enlightened, experiencing enlightenment. It's such a fucking important thing, man. Enlightenment and all that type of stuff. Enlightenment, it's such a lot of us, we just seem to like not care too much about it, but it's so fucking important, guys, that you fucking try as hard as you can to come closer to the truth. That's what enlightenment's about, trying to come closer and closer, man, to the truth and all that type of stuff, man. That's what it's all about, a little bit. That's what enlightenment's about, to some extent, trying to come closer and closer to the truth. It's so important, guys, that you try as hard as you can to come closer and closer to the truth with a capital T. A lot of us, we'd rather stay ignorant and retarded, which is fair enough. If you want to stay ignorant and retarded, fair enough. I think it's very much important that you try as hard as you can to start, you try and become a little bit more enlightened, guys. Don't just stay ignorant and retarded. You want to try coming closer and closer to the truth. Study all the major world religions, get into science as well, science and philosophy, become a little bit more educated about science and philosophy and like religion. That's going to go a long way, guys, in helping you become enlightened. But start to like in your day-to-day lives practice like meditation, deep contemplation, deep like meditation and contemplation, guys. It's so important. Again, that's going to help you go a long way in terms of like becoming enlightened and all that. A lot of us, we'd rather stay fucking ignorant. Is not fucking sad. Enlightenment is so important, but a lot of us would rather stay fucking ignorant, man. It's so sad. It's so fucking sad, man. Enlightenment, that should be like your number one priority. Nothing else should be taking over this type of priority. That should be like the thing that you're probably striving towards, like becoming a little bit more enlightened, man. A little bit more enlightened. That should be your fucking number one priority, man. Forcing, like, you need to fucking force yourself, man. Don't be a dumb fuck. Don't just fuck around not caring about enlightenment. It should be your number one priority. Number one priority. Becoming a little bit more fucking enlightened. Becoming just a little bit more enlightened. That should be your number one fucking priority, guys. Become more enlightened. Come try and force yourself to come closer to the truth. Get into science, philosophy, study all the world religions, practice meditation, contemplation in your day-to-day lives. It's gonna go a long way, guys. It all goes a long way, guys, in helping you come closer and closer to the truth. The truth is all that fucking matters, man. There's nothing else that matters. The truth is like the only thing that's important. There's nothing. There's nothing else that fucking matters, man. The truth is the only thing that matters. Coming closer and closer to that. The harder you try to become more enlightened, the harder you try to come closer and closer to the truth, the better off you'll be. There's no way around it, guys. You have to fucking force yourself, man. You have to fucking force yourself. And stuff like that. You have to force yourself to come closer and closer to the truth. Become more enlightened a little bit. You can't be a dumb fuck, man. You can't just fucking stay ignorant and retarded. You have to fucking try hard. You have to try super fucking hard, man. Become a little bit more enlightened. You can study all the major world religions and stuff like that. Get into like definitely science and philosophy and all that type of stuff. You gotta get into that, man. It's very, very fucking important, man. It's very, very important that you try as hard as you can to get into like, to come closer and closer to the truth and stuff like that. Yeah, you study the major world religions. It's very difficult though, man. It's very difficult to find out what our world's all about, really. It's kind of, that's so hard. It's such a difficult task, but it's such an important task. It's so important that you actually fucking value trying to come closer and closer to the truth. You don't just choose to stay ignorant and kind of brain dead. It's very important, guys. That should be your number one priority. Number one priority is that you fucking value becoming enlightened. You value like fucking coming closer to the truth and all that type of stuff. You fucking value this. You fucking value and you care about like coming closer and closer to the truth and all that type of stuff. You don't just choose to stay ignorant and retarded and whatever. It's so shitty, man. That a lot of us, we fucking don't give a fuck about trying to get closer and closer to the truth. A lot of us, we don't give a fuck. We just rather stay ignorant and dumb. It's so fucking sad to me. Enlightenment, that should be your number one priority, guys, is to become a little bit more enlightened. Open your mind up a little bit more. Come closer and closer to the truth. That's going to help you so tremendously in your life. Enlightenment, nothing else really matters, guys. That should be your number one priority, is to become more fucking enlightened. Force yourself to become more educated, like obviously education, science, philosophy, maybe also meditation, contemplation, just like, because the Buddha's story, that's how the Buddha came to like experience enlightenment. He became enlightened through meditation and deep contemplation and stuff like that, man. It's so fucking important, man, that you fucking try as hard as you possibly can to become more enlightened, closer, and you have to force yourself to become a little bit more closer and closer to the truth and all that type of stuff. It's so important, man. If you don't try and become a little bit more enlightened, you're gonna be fucking sad, man. You're gonna be so lost, man. You're not gonna progress to anywhere, man. You have to fucking... Enlightenment is so important. That should be your number one priority, man, to become a little bit more enlightened and all that type of stuff. It's so important, man. If you don't give a fuck, you're not gonna get anywhere in your life. You're just gonna be a bum, man. I swear, you have to try as hard as you can. Force yourself to become more educated and all that, more enlightened. Force your brain to open up a little bit more. The Buddha, man, through meditation, contemplation, that'll help you out a lot, guys. That's definitely... at least try meditation for 10 minutes a day. For me, I tried meditating 30. I used to do it 30 minutes a day, and now I'm only doing like 10 minutes of meditation a day, because it can become a little bit time consuming. You don't want this to like take too much time away from your day-to-day life, because we're all fucking busy in it. We all have to do work and all that type of stuff in it. It shouldn't take too much time away on all that, but you gotta get into it a little bit. Meditation, contemplation, very fucking important, man. You can't be a fucking ignorant retard. You can't be fucking ignorant, guys. It blows my mind. So many fucking idiot people on this planet, they don't give a fuck about the number one thing that we should all care about is like fucking enlightenment, guys. That's the only thing that's gonna matter in the end. Nothing else matters. Making like money and all that type of shit, it doesn't fucking matter, man. Enlightenment, that is the only thing that matters, guys. That should be your number one priority, to become a little bit more enlightened, to experience enlightenment, to become more educated, knowledgeable about the world, to come closer and closer to finding out the truth about our world. That is the only fucking thing that matters, man. Nothing else fucking matters, man, I swear. It's so dumb to me, man. Meditation, contemplation, that's gonna help you out a lot, obviously. But like, enlightenment, that should be your number one fucking priority, man. There's fucking nothing else that matters. Enlightenment, that is like the number one priority that you should have. There's fucking nothing else that really matters. If you don't care about enlightenment, you're gonna be so like fucking lost, man. You're not gonna get anywhere, man. You're probably not going to get anywhere in life. You're probably just gonna fucking, your whole life's just gonna go down the toilet, guys. Number one priority, enlightenment. You're probably gonna be like a little bit of a wuss. You're probably not gonna fucking, a lot of us, we're so fucking lazy. A lot of us, we don't give a fuck about becoming a little bit more educated and whatever, forcing ourselves to learn more about the world and to improve our knowledge and all that about different things, especially religion and science and philosophy. It's just, which relates to enlightenment. But anyway, just like as the Buddha, meditation, just as like how the Buddha came to like, how did the Buddha become enlightened? He became enlightened through meditation, contemplation. Perhaps maybe you can try that, guys. That might help a massive bunch, to help you become a little bit more aware of everything. Enlightenment, help you achieve that. That is so difficult to achieve, though, to become fully like aware of our world and to come close to literally be on top of the truth. That is so hard, guys. To see the world objectively, that is so hard, guys. To take away all the lenses and the filter, all the bullshit in front of your face, very fucking hard, guys. But it's gonna pay off massively. It's such a, in terms of like investments, that's gonna like, it's gonna pay off massively if you make enlightenment your number one priority. A lot of us, we don't give a fuck, man. It's so fucking sad to me, man. We don't give a fuck about trying to become a little bit more enlightened. It's so sad, man. As long as we just stay fucking ignorant, man. You gotta, that should be your number one priority, man, I swear. As we don't give a fuck about it, man. I mean, a lot of us, we don't give a fuck about becoming a little bit more enlightened and whatever. Enlightenment, that should be your number one priority, man. Become a little bit more enlightened. Open your eyes a little bit more, man. That should be like your number one fucking priority. Nothing else fucking matters, man. Nothing else fucking matters and all that. It should be like your number one fucking priority, man. To become a little bit more aware of the world and all that. To become a little bit more aware of the world and all that type of stuff, man. Become more knowledgeable, come closer and closer to the truth. That should be your number one priority, man. Nothing else fucking matters. Everything else is just fucking irrelevant, man. Nothing else fucking matters, man. Enlightenment, that should be your number one fucking priority, man. To open your eyes up a little bit more and to see things as they actually are. That is so difficult, guys. To take away all the lenses, filters, bullshit in front of your face. Nothing else fucking matters, man. Enlightenment, that should be your number one priority. Number one fucking priority. Anything else is just bullshit, man. If you don't get enlightenment, that's the only fucking thing that matters, man. That should be your number one fucking priority. Everything else is just bullshit, man. Money, cars, women, all that is just fucking bullshit. Telling you 100% the only thing that matters really in this life is becoming enlightened, just like the Buddha. You gotta become enlightened, maybe through meditation, contemplation, just like the Buddha. You gotta maybe go through that first to experience enlightenment. Whatever you do, always make enlightenment your number one priority. To become enlightened, to become more knowledgeable about the world, to become closer and closer to the truth about our world, to come closer to the ultimate reality behind everything, man. Enlightenment is so fucking important. To becoming a little bit more aware of everything. That's so important, guys. Enlightenment, there's nothing else that matters. You gotta force yourself, man, to become a little bit more aware. little bit more aware, man. It's so fucking important. Becoming more aware, coming closer and closer to the truth, becoming a little bit more aware and enlightened is so fucking important, man. Becoming more aware of everything around us. Your eyes are opening up. You're seeing the world for what it actually is. That's so important. You're beginning to like open your eyes and you're seeing things for what they actually are. You're taking away all the lenses, the filters, the bullshit in front of your face. I think really that's about it, guys. Enlightenment, that should be your #1 priority.